Whether it's a musical masterpiece or a beautifully crafted object, art and design is a human experience that almost everyone can appreciate. It has the power to invigorate you, reawaken dormant memories, or simply improve your quality of life. And this is exactly how artists and designers feel when their work isn't recognized. It takes time, effort, and a great deal of trial and error for creative people to make beautiful work. And it can be really discouraging when nobody cares about it. All of these creative achievements are nothing short of magic. These are all well-known masterpieces, but there are tens of thousands of other brilliant creative works that will never be heard, seen, or recognized. Why is there such a disparity between the creative cultural icons of our time and the artists and designers who are just as talented but remain overlooked? Why doesn't society value creativity? Creative people are some of the most mocked and disdained people in society, but also some of the most respected and celebrated, all at the same time. Our lives are significantly improved because of creative work. In this video, we'll cover the problems of creativity, and I'll tell you about some of the solutions that I've had success with. I'm not a world-famous designer or anything, but I am able to pick the types of clients that I want to work with, which is something that most creative people would be pretty happy with. The average person simply doesn't understand the amount of thought and consideration that goes into a creative masterpiece. This is David. It's an iconic and world-renowned sculpture made by Michelangelo. If you look at David's eyes up close, you'll notice that each eye is looking in two slightly different directions. His pupils are also hollowed out so that they cast darker shadows. This is not an accident. These visual tricks help to make David's stare look intense and alive. It looks a bit weird when you're zoomed in like this, but Michelangelo knew that people would be looking at the statue from a distance, and he took that into consideration. There are literally thousands of decisions like this made in every great creative work, whether it's a beautiful car design or a great piece of music or a beautiful sculpture. This is true mastery, but most people don't notice these nuances because they just don't care. In the modern world, convenience is king. The less we understand and the less we have to think, the more successful we are. If someone drives for us, we don't have to think about driving anymore. That's considered success. If someone cleans our house for us, that's success. If we don't have to think about the small details of our lives, that is the ultimate measure of success in the modern world. As a designer myself, pretty much my entire job is centered around not making you have to think when you're using a product that I make for you. All we care about is output and how it benefits us. And we're all the same, including you and me. We mindlessly scroll through Instagram and other social media sites and see amazing acts of skill and talent without even giving them 2 seconds of thought. When was the last time you actually sat down to watch movie credits roll through? Did you ever look at the visual effects teams? Did you ever look to see who that obscure actor was who had the little tiny role? You probably almost never do. None of us care because it's far easier to consume creative works than it is to reflect on them. But in the case of movies, at least the person is credited. In most cases, the designer or creator is never credited for their work. Nobody knows the people behind the original iPhone, for example. I mean, sure, you might know Steve Jobs or the head designer Johnny Ive, but what about the rest of the geniuses who made it happen? Speaking of geniuses, here are a couple of people who helped me make this video. Maybe you'll actually read through it this time, but I wouldn't blame you if you don't. And I'm not blaming anyone for this. The modern world is incredibly overwhelming, and we'd all go insane if we had to try and understand the nuance of every detail of everything. But it is a major reason why creative pursuits just aren't valued. It just takes too much time and effort, and it doesn't directly impact us. Our emphasis on convenience hides the inner workings of something, and we're actively discouraged from truly understanding, and therefore appreciating great creative works. I think you can start to see how the details behind David's stare suddenly isn't really that valued to any of us. Those details are fundamental to creative work, but ultimately don't matter to us. And it bleeds into other aspects of creative production. Probably most importantly, creative pursuits are judged based on scale rather than quality or merit. Most of us don't know how to evaluate creative pursuits in any sort of conceptual, philosophical, or craftsmanship level. So we really only focus on two things: how much money it made and how many people know about it. Creativity can't be easily measured in any other way, and that's a big problem in commercial or corporate contexts. Even creatives themselves don't always know what's good or bad. There's the constant issue of never knowing if your work is actually good. There's a phenomenon known as the IKEA effect, where people are willing to spend 63% more on IKEA furniture that they assembled themselves, even if it's built the wrong way. We tend to love our own ideas more than other people's ideas, so it makes it really hard to evaluate the quality of your own work. With most other professional fields, you're solving a concrete problem. With design or art, That can be the case, but not always. There are lots of intangibles. Any new idea that you present, whether it's revolutionary or terrible, is going to get the same reaction: ridicule. Our default response to anything new that we don't know how to respond to is to mock it. It's so difficult to tell whether you're onto something big or you're wasting your time, which is a real issue with radical creative works. Even the iPhone, one of the most iconic product designs of our time, was never a guaranteed success. It's easy to look back on the original iPhone now and see why it would be successful, but it wasn't so clear when it first launched.
$500? That is the most expensive phone in the world. And it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard.
It's likely that we'd value creativity and craftsmanship as a society if we were actually encouraged to understand it. It's not that surprising that creativity isn't valued, but it actually gets even more complicated. Solving an open-ended design problem or coming up with an artistic masterpiece is like trying to solve a puzzle, except all of the puzzle pieces are black. The puzzle has no beginning or end, and some of the pieces that are critically important to seeing the whole picture are hidden in weird places. Some are in couch cushions, some of the pieces are up in a tree, others are down by the beach. It's incredibly inefficient and slow and laborious. Creativity is really disorganized and non-linear. This is the absolute opposite of the way that successful businesses run. Businesses rely on organization and order. Like I said before, the biggest measure of success for creative work in modern society is around how much money it makes or how well known it is. Creativity is incredibly difficult to make profitable because it's so unpredictable. Even if you do find that perfect design concept, the people commissioning your work will usually reject it. Mike in business development says it's an unproven idea. Karen from marketing says there's not enough sales data on it. It's not that they have bad intentions, it's just that they have different interests that are centered around making the company money in the safest way possible. So when a creative person sees a groundbreaking and novel idea, the administrators in the company just see a risky, unproven thread. But the thing is, great design and art is inherently polarizing. If everyone likes the work, it's probably not very good. When Michelangelo presented The Last Judgment, it was criticized for being too violent and having too much nudity. Michelangelo depicts himself right here. This sagging, deformed body is his self-portrait, and it represents the contempt he had for the patrons who commissioned him to do the work. This is pretty much exactly how I feel when I'm working with a really difficult client. And you can't blame the patrons and business people of the world, really. I mean, I know it's cool and edgy to say you want to disrupt the status quo or whatever, but you're not going to make friends by telling people that the thing that they've been doing with great success for 50 years is dumb. I mean, it's just not going to go well. An unproven idea is really, really risky. You can be cautious or you can be creative, but there's no such thing as a cautious creative. Failure is a huge part of creativity, but it's just not something that's tolerated in commercial settings. If you're a designer or an artist, think about how many ideas you come up with in a year that never actually make it past the concept phase. Thousands of thumbnail concepts and quick sketches or initial ideas get tossed in the garbage in search of something better. From a business standpoint, all of these early ideas are just inefficient failures, but from a creative standpoint, they are absolutely essential to getting to the final product. Because failure isn't really tolerated in commercial contexts, fear of failure tends to paralyze us all. And it's pretty much impossible to be creative if you're nervous or anxious. In fact, monetary incentives tend to be bad for coming up with creative ideas. According to 51 studies analyzed by the London School of Economics, financial incentives can result in a negative impact on overall performance. If you want to kill creativity, give people a reward for doing well. That's why it's been said that the Nobel Prize is the tombstone on all great creative work. So before I talk my way out of ever getting hired for design consulting work again, I do want to mention that you can employ processes and systems for design work to reduce risk. A lot of commercial creative work is done within the confines of a company's process, while showing little bits of risk here and there so you don't blow up the whole damn building. Most of my paid consulting work is centered around doing that. But at that point, I mean, is it really creative? In some ways, yes. I mean, I guess setting up new processes can be creative in its own way, but it's not likely to yield revolutionary results. It's more likely to yield incremental improvements, which in all honesty is usually what companies are after anyway. Most people who work as designers are actually just following a very constrained process to create somewhat predictable, proven results. Young designers and artists focus pretty much all of their time on improving their craft rather than understanding how businesses operate. So most of my time in design school was spent learning how to draw and make models rather than learning about how design fits into a larger business context. The main thing that gets me or you or any creative hired is their experience and expertise. But knowledge and experience is the enemy of creativity because you're already making many assumptions about how the project should work. It keeps us from seeing other decisions because we just go to the proven thing that worked in the past. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. I do this professionally all the time. This is the logical path if you're trying to be efficient after all. But I would argue that it's not very creative. The bottom line is that most professional work is about the bottom line. Are you making the company more money? If the answer is yes, figure out how to make a process out of it and do it over and over again. If not, you're fired. So brutal, but it's true. Companies and society say that they value innovation or divergent thinking, and companies may even have innovation programs, but very few of them will ever go through the insane risk of going past the idea phase. This is why most revolutionary creative work is done by people with nothing to lose. They're also usually outsiders. For example, Apple created the iPod after narrowly escaping bankruptcy. The movie Rocky was Sylvester Stallone's last-ditch effort to make it as a writer and an actor. Coco Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Kanye West, and many other rappers, every single one of these creative powerhouses started with no money, no prospects, and nothing to lose. I mean, sure, look, there's plenty of spectacular creative work out there that was made by people who weren't desperate, but most people won't take that leap if they're already comfortable. The problem stems from something even deeper than that, though. Most of the time, we simply don't fit in and we know it. And most creative people don't either. Society wants you to be a good little worker bee, and most creative people are renegade killer bees. Creativity sometimes feels more like a curse than a gift. You can't escape your own thoughts, and you want your ideas to be recognized, but a lot of the time, nobody cares. And that's not an easy thing to deal with. I know this sounds really negative, but I promise you'll be more optimistic by the end of the video. In order to address the problem, we need to understand it. Creativity isn't just forgotten in modern society, it's often maligned. Anytime you try to do something new or innovative, it's gonna be met with skepticism, ridicule, or even hostility. Another thing is that the uncertainty of creativity is what makes it exciting, but also exhausting. You just never know how your work is gonna be received. So, what's the silver lining here? First of all, presentation is everything. All great creatives understand showmanship. Whether it's reviewing an object that's actually cake, an iPhone unboxing, or an Issey Miyake fashion show, presentation is everything. It all boils down to courage. That's what my mentor Rafi tells me, and I agree with it 100%. I've come very close to quitting design entirely a few times. But every time I'm about to quit, I just go back to focusing on things that I find exciting and new, and somehow things just sort of fall into place. If you're doing creative work for corporations or for money, you have to play by the rules of business. This video pretty clearly outlines the motivations of non-creative people and corporations. They want to reduce risk. So anytime you present creative work to an administrator, you have to look at it through that lens. If you do work for a client, it's likely that you have to compromise your vision in at least some way. There's value in creation for its own sake. There's nothing more life-affirming and courageous than the choice to create. It's the choice to make the world a little bit better, even if it's just for one person. Never forget that your work matters, even if it only matters to you.